Well, good evening, everybody, and I hope and pray that you're well and have enjoyed this Saturday. It was a beautiful day out today. I went out for a nice walk, and it was very enjoyable being out after we'd had some rain overnight. We've coming to the end of our series on Genesis, and so as this is a bit of a summary series, I could have chosen anything for the Bible reading, but I'm going to read from us from Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 to 8, the call to Abraham, as it's such a critical passage. I won't really be focusing upon it during the sermon, but it's a great passage to hear again. So Genesis 12, verses 1 to 8. The Lord had said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you'll be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." So Abram went, and as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took with his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. Abram travelled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh, as at Shechem. At that time the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord said to Abram and said, and the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there he went on towards the hill east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. And this is the word of the Lord. Well, we must be coming of age. This is the 21st sermon on Genesis, and we've had Genesis that we've had in this series, and this series started in October last year. Now, the Spring Festival didn't happen last year, but if it had, we would have almost gone from one Quilt and Craft Expo to the next with this series. And so it's time to pull together the various threads of topics and imagery which Genesis presents us with and see what tapestry is formed. Genesis is absolutely core to our reading of the Bible because Genesis sets the scene for who God is, who humanity is, and how God interacts with humanity, as well as the rest of creation, actually. The book of Genesis, together with the rest of the first 5 books of the Bible, called the Pentateuch or Torah, was put into its final form hundreds of years before Jesus was born. It's worth considering whether the image of God and humanity which we're presented with in Genesis is essentially similar to the image of God and humanity we find presented by Jesus in the New Testament. There are times you may hear someone say that Jesus and the God that we see in the New Testament is so much more loving and nicer than the God of the Old Testament. But is that really the case? Well, we start when we're looking at what is the big picture of Genesis. We start with with the obvious, and it's where Genesis starts. Yahweh is the God who creates the whole world. Yahweh is not part of creation, nor does Yahweh need any assistance or have any limitations. God simply speaks or wills things into being. Yahweh, being the creator, helps us see that God is interested in the whole of creation, and there's nothing which is outside of God's authority or care. However, although God creates and has authority over the whole of creation, God also creates humanity in his own image to have dominion over the world. Humanity has a particular relationship with God and a unique responsibility to God, presumably to express something of the authority that God has, and perhaps in the same way that God does, with a loving and caring attitude. Yahweh, being the God of the whole world, also reminds us that all people are God's concerns and have a responsibility before him. We can't just think of God in the Old Testament as only being concerned with the nation of Israel, as God is the creator of all of humanity. Perhaps the most famous verse in the Bible is John 3:16. "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life." We likewise see Jesus' desire for the whole world to come under God's authority when he states in Matthew 28, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." Whether it be in the Old Testament or in the New Testament, Yahweh is the God of the whole world, and um, and Yahweh is the God of the whole world, who both expresses care for all people and calls for allegiance from all people. But why was the sending of Jesus necessary? The New Testament makes it clear that Jesus was sent to deal with humanity's rebellion against God and failure to meet God's standard. This rebellion against God and rejection of God's rule finds its start in Genesis. Genesis uses the imagery of Adam and Eve eating fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and the message is that humanity seeks to determine for ourselves what is right and what is wrong. Our first parents sought to gain knowledge separate from God, separate from God's knowledge and separate from God's care for us. Genesis helps us see the heart of humanity's rebellion against God. Yes, our rejection of God's rule is seen in the multitude of things, big and small, which we do wrong, say wrong, think wrong, and in our failure to do what is right. But Genesis makes it clear that the heart of humanity's problem is that we reject God as our King and loving Creator who knows what is best for us. We not only see this in the account of Adam and Eve, but we also see it in the Tower of Babel, where the people there wanted to make a tower to the heavens and make a name for themselves. One of the big pictures of Genesis, though, is not only does it tell us that humanity is rebellious, but that God is a God of justice. Generally, we like the idea of justice when it's in our favor, when it calls people to account who have wronged or hurt us. But we don't like it so much when justice holds us to account. The justice which Yahweh expresses in Genesis results in Adam and Eve being cast out of Eden. It results in a great flood destroying the world, of people being scattered from Babel, of the annihilation of Sodom and Gomorrah, and so on. And at this point, we may think that we really do have a clear difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament. We don't like this God who punishes wrongdoing and disciples his people in such a firm way. Can't we just have nice and sweet Jesus? If we think like that, then perhaps we really need to pay more attention to Jesus' words. Words like these, Matthew 10, verses 34 to 39. "Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. Anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it." Or Jesus' words in Matthew chapter 7, verses 21 to 23. "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only those who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, 'Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles?' Then I will tell them plainly, 'I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers.'" Or perhaps we look at Jesus' words in John chapter 5, verses 21 to 23. "For just as the Father raises the dead and gives life to them, even so the Son gives life to those whom he is pleased to give it. Moreover, the Father judges no one, but has entrusted all judgment to the Son, that all may honor the Son just as they honor the Father. Whoever does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him." Whether it be in the Old Testament or the New, God is a God of justice, who calls humanity to account not just for the wrongs we have done to each other or our failure to care for creation, but ultimately God calls us to account for our rejection of God's rule over us and our rebellion against him as our Creator. Jesus demands total allegiance. For like God the Father, Jesus is worthy of it. God's justice, though, is not the end of the story. And fortunately, we don't have to wait till the New Testament to see how God would address humanity's rebellion without simply scrapping the lot of us. To start with, God's justice is tinged with mercy. Eating the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil did result in death entering the world, but Adam and Eve didn't die straight away. Instead, God sent them out of the Garden of Eden, but also provided them with garments and promised that one day he would raise up a descendant who would destroy evil. Similarly, when Cain is sent away for killing his brother Abel, he receives a mark so that others won't attack him. And we could name other expressions of God's mercy too. However, as I mentioned, God promised to raise up a descendant to destroy evil. One of the important threads in Genesis is of God's plan to bring about a people for himself. Genesis brings up some repeated and important ideas when it comes to this plan of Yahweh's. As I go through these threads, you may well see a similarity between what God is doing in Genesis and what we see in the gospel. First, the plan is God's initiative. God doesn't wait for Abraham or anyone else to show themselves to be worthy of his love and care, but calls people to trust him even when they're unworthy. In fact, second, we see that God's plan is being worked out despite the failure and shortcomings of those whom God chooses. These failures weren't just there before they were chosen, but some of these failures continued after they were chosen. Third, God's plan may focus in on a small group, but its broader goal is on bringing blessing to the whole world. As we saw last week, God's working through the evil plans of people put Joseph in an Egyptian prison at the right time to hear Pharaoh's dream. God worked through an individual, Joseph, to save God's chosen family, but it also resulted in the saving of many lives, and it also resulted in the people in Egypt hearing about the God whom Joseph trusted in. Finally, the response to which Yahweh called for from people was that of trust. As we've seen in the lives of the patriarch, their trust in Yahweh was far from perfect, but they did seek to trust and follow him, and it did have an impact on their lives. To me, this sounds an awful lot like the gospel, the good news of Jesus. We break God's rules and rebel against God's rightful authority as creator of all. We also hurt and do wrong to people, and as such we are deserving of God's justice, which won't be in our favour. However, God has taken the initiative and sent Jesus to rescue a people who are far from perfect. God begins with a few, but seeks to use these people to reach all people and call the rest of the people, the rest of humanity, to trust God's plan and what Jesus has achieved. The tapestry of Genesis is a beautiful black and white picture of what we see in full colour in Jesus. This is another reason why I love the book of Genesis, because it is the book of beginnings. That's really its name, but it's not just the book of our beginning of where humanity came from. It's the beginnings of God's dealings with humanity, and we can see God's heart, God's care for people, even in the face of our rebellion. It wasn't just there at the beginning. It reaches through and comes to its culmination, its fulfillment in Jesus. And that's wonderfully good news. And I do encourage you and want to support you in looking at Jesus more and more. And I'd love to see you at church on Sunday, or perhaps you can contact me and see if you can get some support through resources that we've got here online. Well, God bless you and have a lovely evening.